Cunard enjoy government subsidies, but need that be of any...
This was the London home of the shipbuilder William Pirrie.
Among the dead are some of the most wealthy and influential celebrities of the day.
And to compete with Cunard, we'd need 2 ships.
To trump them, you'd need 3. You'd need 3.
Even if rammed by another ship, she was designed to stay afloat. Yet she took only 2 hours to sink.
The deal was made in Belgravia, but it was Belfast where Titanic would be built. Belfast was Ireland's industrial heart, and its lifeblood was the talent of its workers. They'd made Pirrie's company, Harland and Wolff, the biggest shipbuilder in the world.
Did you give any special consideration to the question of providing additional lifeboat accommodation?
I think the position was taken that the ship was looked upon as being practically unsinkable. She was looked upon as a lifeboat herself.
Pirrie's chief of design was his wife's brother, Alexander Carlyle. Chalk and a cheese.
Tommy, Roderick, Alexander's put you in the picture.
Indeed. It's tremendous news.
Thomas Andrews was Pirrie's nephew. Many believed he was already being groomed to take over the company.
Weren't you afraid to tell those fellows where to go, like, with them being Protestants and all?
You're a Protestant. Who's Mr. Miller here? Should we be afraid of you?
No.
Live and let live, they say. Aye. We're all Irish men here.
Two years before the scheduled launch date, Ismay met with his chief designer, Alexander Carlyle.
Much longer entrance into the room here, if we can. The staircase needs to be much grander.
Well, the bulkhead will have to be lowered.
Is there a problem? Isn't she safe?
Of course. Excuse me.
It's got 4 funnels.
Correct.
But you said there'd only be 3 engines.
William feels these ships will be more cost-effective with only 3.
And of course, we all know that the more funnels a ship has, the keener the paying public are to travel on them.
Cunard built the Mauretania and the Lusitania with 4. We didn't think you'd want your ships to have less.
So 1 funnel is an ornament?
Correct, sir.
Well, I think she's magnificent. How soon can you start?
We can commence work on ship 400 in a matter of months. 401 soon after.
Well then, I'd better sign the contract.
Of course.
The bulkheads are partitions used to create watertight compartments in the hull of the ship, each of which could be isolated and sealed off to contain flooding in the event of an emergency.
Now, they'll need names. We can't keep calling them ships 400 and 401.
Surely, since 400 is the first in the class, we must call her Olympic.
Agreed. And 401?
She's your ship, Bruce.
William, you know your classics. Olympus was home to the Greek gods, that's true, but what of their great rivals, the Titans? Giants, every one of them. Olympic's partner should surely be Titanic.
Very good.
Titanic it is, then.
Was ever a ship more appropriately named?
Olympic and Titanic.
The boat deck should not be so cluttered.
Cluttered?
Yes, cluttered. People don't pay to look at lifeboats.
Well, I thought 48 to be a reasonable amount. Especially if the Board of Trade increased the requirements.
Well, let's not second-guess the British Board of Trade, shall we? Let's move on to the Grand Salon.
And this meeting with Mr. Ismay lasted 4 hours.
Yes, we talked about the whole of the decorations of the ship.
Never mind the decorations, we're talking about lifeboats.
Well, the lifeboat part, I suppose, took about 5 or 10 minutes.
How many lifeboats did you think there ought to be?
I thought there ought to be 3 on each set of davits.
And how many would that make altogether?
48 boats.
You thought there ought to be 48.
Yes.
Whereas in point of fact, how many were there?
16.
16.
While the design of Titanic is being changed,
And Lord Pirrie's ambitions were also growing. Political ambitions. Pirrie had always been a unionist, happy with Ireland's place in the United Kingdom. Overnight, he turned to nationalism. Ireland would prosper more, he argued, free from rule by London. Many Irishmen shared this vision. They called it Home Rule. But Pirrie was playing with fire. Those against Home Rule included many of his own workers. As Titanic took shape, a rift was developing in the shipyard.
He was nicknamed the Millionaire's Captain. People like Guggenheim or even J.P. Morgan would actually change their sailings and their travel arrangements so that they could sail in a ship commanded by Captain Smith.
America.
Where's America?
I'll show you, son. Here is Ireland. Here is Belfast. And here's America. A lot of people go there. A lot of Irishmen go there.
Why?
Apple pie.
What?
They say they've got the best apple pie in the world. Apple pie like you've never tasted. Covered in cream.
Honest? Can we go?
Tommy.
You're still not yourself, are you?
I'm just a wee bit tired, that's all.
You need to go and see Dr. Henry.
Can't afford it.
An outside lavatory, a tin bath, and just about enough food on the table for the men building Titanic.
I propose we install 16 lifeboat stations, 4 lifeboats at each station, giving us up to a total of 64 lifeboats.
Which would exceed Board of Trade regulations by some way.
As Board of Trade regulations stand. But given the size of these ships, we must surely expect them to demand greater lifeboat accommodation.
William?
I'm sure it's best to prepare for all eventualities. Now, if we look at the first-class lounge.
It's Alfie Cunningham, isn't it?
Aye.
You ever thought of joining a lodge, son?
Oh, well, maybe I have, like, but...
Ballymacard Lodge. We meet.
I know we meet.
Well, that's grand. We're there every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. I hope to see you.
Aye. Maybe you will.
You wouldn't.
Wouldn't what?
Go to an Orange Lodge meeting?
Who says?
What in Egypt you'd look in a sash and a bowler hat, banging a stupid great drum? Get lost, Flaherty,
Come
would you?
on, can't you take a joke?
I'm looking for my sister's husband, Tommy Miller. Do you know him?
Aye, he's over there.
Thomas?
March 1912. The Olympic Titanic sister ship returns to port for emergency repairs. So the maiden voyage of the Titanic is pushed back a month. It will now be sailing in mid-April.
Same shape as you've been building for years, isn't it?
Francis Carruthers, the representative from the Board of Trade, charged with ensuring safety standards.
Yes, I'm not disputing the size. They're colossal. But the hydrodynamics haven't changed at all. Long and narrow in beam.
Which is why they're known as the Greyhounds of the Sea.
Or coffin ships, as your rivals refer to them. Or coffin ships, as your rivals refer to them.
No time for joking, Mr. Carruthers. We're here to discuss safety, not aesthetics.
And these discussions, a year before Titanic's launch, would be critical. They would determine who would live, who would die, and they would cost the lives of 2 of the men in that room.
What would happen if she were in a collision?
And were to behold as a result? Well, I think I can fairly say that our new bulkhead door system is both revolutionary and unique. The damaged area will be completely sealed from the rest of the vessel, hermetically sealed.
In theory, she should stay afloat no matter what the damage. The ship is, in a real sense, her own
lifeboat. Nonetheless, I see you've allowed for 16 lifeboats?
16. I have made allowance for a great deal more than 16.
But 16 will meet the legal requirement exactly. Lord Pirrie knows that.
He has spoken directly to you?
Well, yes.
The provision of lifeboats, the entire design, is my responsibility.
For Carlyle, 40 years with Harland and Wolff, this was breaking point.
The regulations clearly show that 16 lifeboats is sufficient for a vessel of 10,000 tons and over.
Agreed, William. But these ships are 5 times that size. How on earth can we get more than 3,000 people into 16 lifeboats?
I have freely offered a further provision of 4 life rafts as well. We are now giving them more than their regulations demand.
Oh, the regulations are out of date.
This is a theoretical risk only, Alexander. The ships have been designed by you so that they cannot sink.
Don't you see, William? Any human design is fallible. Surely the first rule of safety must be to think the unthinkable.
And you are happy for our passengers to do the same.
What?
Has it occurred to you what they would think if the promenade decks were festooned with lifeboats?
You are concerned the passengers may be alarmed by the lifeboats?
In the numbers you recommend, yes. Our intention is to offer passengers the experience of a lifetime, not to frighten them so much they never want to travel on a White Star ship again.
So, this is one of your economic decisions.
These ships have to sail at a profit, Alexander, and I have to build them at a profit.
And no doubt not having to provide a few dozen lifeboats will add a small but very welcome addition to your profit margin.
You know that's nonsense. Alexander!
It was the end of Carlyle's involvement with the company. Titanic was the last ship he would ever design.
Because it was such a luxury ship. All the millionaires were on it. And also, the most important thing was they said it was unsinkable.
Titanic would need a new chief designer. For Lord Pirrie, there was only one choice: his nephew, Thomas Andrews. In the spring of that year, 1910, Halley's Comet was visible in the night skies throughout Europe. Some say it was there when Andrews took his wife, Helen, pregnant with their firstborn, to show off his new liner.
She's my ship now, Helen.
Titanic and Thomas Andrews would be inseparable to the very end.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. As you all know, the Olympic is currently laid up. It has therefore been decided that the Olympics chief officer, Mr. Wilde, will be joining us as chief officer. So, Mr. Murdoch, you will now be first officer, and Mr. Lightoller, you will be second officer. Mr. Blair, I would like to have a word with you in private.
Can you believe it?
The arrival of officers from the Olympic means that Murdoch and Lightoller are both demoted. Second Officer Blair is asked to leave the ship. Blair is so keen to get off the ship, he accidentally takes with him the key to his locker. It's a crucial oversight. His locker contains the binoculars for the lookouts in the crow's nest.
Samuel Joseph Scott, aged 15, was the first to die on Titanic. 17 would lose their lives building these ships. A German company was supervising the crane's construction. But as the monster grew, so the rows began.
I'm telling you, bonehead, if you want us up there, you can whistle!
The Belfast men were deeply suspicious of the Germans.
The lads reckon it's none too safe up there, and they might have a point. The way they see it, it's a German crane. Let them risk their own necks. See, a lot of the boys are convinced they're spies. Come here to steal the secrets of our new ships, sell them to our competitors.
No one was better equipped to tackle the problem than the chief draftsman, Roderick Chisholm. His way with words would eventually win him a place on Titanic. Roddy Chisholm had worked his way into management from the shop floor. He could get on with anyone. Better still, He spoke German.
Je schneller der Kran steht, desto schneller werdet ihr alle wieder zu Hause.
National pride was at stake. The Germans agreed to finish the crane themselves. For young men, these were stirring times. Patriotism and religion were to be celebrated. Alfie hadn't joined the Orange Order himself. He was too busy studying. But he could understand the pride felt by those who were Orange men.
You all right there, Alfie?
Fine, Mr. Frost. Good man.
To keep his ship out of harm's way, he plots a southern route across the Atlantic, away from the known ice region.
The giant floating crane was ready at last. But the German flag had been raised as a finishing touch. The Belfast men were not impressed.
Mr. Chisholm, that flag is an insult to us all. Those Germans are looking to start trouble here.
Meine Freunde, die Männer hier unten feiern eure unglaubliche Leistung. Euer Mut und euer Geschick sind uns allen ein Beispiel.
Vielen Dank! You tell him to get that rag down, or we'll rip it down!
Kommt herunter. Wir wollen auf die Zukunft unserer Länder anstoßen.
Ich schmeicheln uns, Herr Chisholm. Ehrenmänner sind ein Haufen von Bettnässen. Aber wir werden ein Bier mit ihnen trinken. So where do we stand, Mr. Chisholm?
We've apologized handsomely. And I've promised you all a drink.
The Germans surrendered both the crane and their flag. They were even persuaded to hoist the Union Jack. Soon enough, these men really would be at war. But for now, peace.
Was Mr. Phillips the senior operator?
Yes.
Bride and Phillips are not employed by the Titanic, but by Marconi.
Also, we are short of a potato peeler.
Well done, Tommy. Well done.
But there was no escaping the bitterness in the yard. Ireland was heading for political crisis.
Home rule simply means granting Ireland a measure of independence. It doesn't mean casting ourselves adrift in the Atlantic.
With respect, that isn't how many of the men in the yard see it.
And they're blind. If we get this right now, Tommy, the future of Ireland will be assured for 100 years or more. Now have that removed, will you?
Need anything before I turn him?
Yeah. You can take this to Captain Smith.
So is this true? You really might get asked to go to New York?
Maybe. But I've been thinking, whether I do go or not, we should go. As a family.
America? To live?
The doctor says you need dry air, clear air. All it does is rain in this city.
We can't leave Belfast. Why not? Because this is our home. We can't give that all up just because of me.
People leave Ireland every day. And it wouldn't be just because you. This city, that yard, there's something bad in the air. It's not the place I want to be anymore.
There's a lifeboat drill at 11 a.m.
11, eh?
Yes, sir.
Sir, Mr. Captain Smith.
Thank you, Mr.
Right, sir.
Ice warnings are not unusual in spring, and the ice region mentioned in the Coronia message is a long way from the Titanic.
I shall be at the church service, Mr. Murdoch, and then I shall be making my rounds.
Yes, sir. Guess that means lifeboat drill's cancelled.
The captain never gives a reason why he cancels the lifeboat drill.
Then, disaster. Titanic's sister ship, Olympic, was holed in a collision with a Royal Navy cruiser, HMS Hawke. The impact was felt back in Belfast, because the man responsible was the skipper who would soon also command Titanic, Captain Smith.
The captain of HMS Hawk, quite simply, got too close and lost control.
The concern now was that these liners were monster ships, too big to be handled safely.
And it's plain from the photographs which vessel came off worse.
Titanic's builders were past masters at handling the press.
That Olympic comfortably survived the collision. Consider what would have happened to any other vessel which had suffered such severe damage. Say the Mauretania. As water flooded in, her poor crewmen would have scurried around frantically trying to close the doors between all her separate compartments and stem the flow. A vain endeavor.
But we at Harland and Wolff, gentlemen, have introduced automatic watertight doors.
A simple flick of the switch suffices to seal the entire ship and render her safe.
Much had been made of the watertight doors, a design that Harland and Wolff had actually borrowed from a German rival. What was undeniable was that they worked.
As soon as water is detected in the ship, an electric switch is automatically thrown, causing all the bulkhead doors throughout the ship to close at once. Mr. Frost. I should come to this side of the door, Mr. Green, or you may get very wet.
There we are, home and dry.
You see?
With her automatic doors in place, Olympic had stayed afloat, even with 2 compartments completely flooded.
So this, in your view, makes the ship what? Unsinkable?
Captain Smith had long argued exactly that.
I cannot conceive of any vital disaster happening to this vessel. Modern shipping has simply gone beyond that.
Look, if there's a ship safer, we don't know of it. As far as I'm concerned, she is practically unsinkable.
Practically unsinkable was the phrase used to sell Titanic. To most people, it meant simply that Titanic was safe. The fact that her sister ship had survived a collision with a cruiser only reinforced that.
In the event of an emergency, the crew are unrehearsed.
Lord Pirrie pushed the date of Titanic's sailing back into April 1912.
The Titanic is heading southwest towards the Gulf Stream. It should be on a course that takes it out of the path of any icebergs.
His choice of speaker would outrage his opponents.
It has to be Mr. Churchill, Margaret.
You know they'll hate you for it.
We'll make them see the error of their ways.
Winston Churchill, the Lord of the Admiralty, was a hate figure for Ulster loyalists. Like Pirrie, he had a Unionist pedigree. He too was seen as a traitor.
To allow the ship to travel even further south, towards a safe area of the Gulf Stream and away from the perilous ice region.
But you will recover.
I want you to take my place on Titanic. Ismay is going too. Between the two of you, you can decide if this whole enterprise was worth it. I'm not sure if I know anymore.
And you simply delivered it to an officer on the bridge?
It's for the captain.
Which officer?
I can't remember.
None of the surviving officers recall ever seeing this vital message. To this day, nobody knows if the message was delivered.
It was assumed that the incredible discovery of the Titanic wreckage in 1985 by Robert Ballard and his expedition team had been a purely scientific effort. However, this was not actually the case. A lot more than just the location of the Titanic shipwreck was at stake for this expedition. And it turns out, the US Navy had actually launched the mission with a top-secret objective in mind.
But their wireless operator has not waited for Phillips to stop sending his messages and overrides it with a powerful signal.
Ah, bloody idiot.
Phillips replies to tell the Californian to stop sending ice warnings while he is busy with passenger messages.
California keeps sending weather reports. I'm still plowing through this lot. You want me to take over? No, go back to sleep. You can take over at 12. I'm not working past midnight. I'm knackered.
The Californian's response is to turn off its wireless equipment for the night. The Titanic has now lost radio contact with the only ship less than 2 hours away.
The truth regarding the 1985 expedition that found the Titanic finally emerged in 2018. Declassified information meant that Robert Ballard could reveal that the team had in fact been part of a secret U.S. military mission to investigate 2 sunken nuclear submarines at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
From the bridge, it looks like they've had a lucky escape. The collision is so gentle that many of the passengers and crew sleep through it. No one imagined an iceberg would collide with the bow.
The crash happened before we had the boat shut.
Where was this crash?
Water came pouring in about 2 feet above the stokehold plate.
Can you point to where that is on the ship?
Ballard would state, "They did not want the world to know that, so I had to have a cover story." Back in the 1980s, Ballard was a commander in the U.S. Navy and a scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts. Ballard had been building an underwater research vessel to realize his lifelong dream of finding the Titanic. It was his obsession. However, Ballard was unable to procure adequate funding for the project, so he approached the U.S. Navy for help. Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Submarine Warfare Ronald Thunman was receptive, but a bargain was struck.
The ship's side was torn from the third stokehold to the forward end.
The last time a ship had struck an iceberg was in 1879, when SS Arizona plowed into one head-on. The bow was badly crushed, but she stayed afloat, proving that the front bulkhead did its job.
The Navy would offer Ballard the funding and opportunity to search for the Titanic, but on one critical condition. He would have to first explore the wrecks of the USS Thresher and the USS Scorpion. Thunman was taken aback by Ballard's candid reason for approaching the Navy for funding. He responded to Ballard by saying, quote, "Come on, this is a serious, top-secret operation. Find the Titanic? That's crazy." It was actually Ballard himself who suggested the cover story, because he believed the Titanic wreck site was located somewhere between the Thresher and Scorpion submarines.
It's early in the morning, September 1918, the twilight of the First World War. Olympic, a troop ship, is making its way from Southampton. All is calm, but beneath the waves, a predator lurks.
Ballard would reveal how he pondered over every detail of what he knew about the Titanic, including where witnesses and maritime experts thought the ship sank, and where the ship's lifeboats were found. He would state how his gut told him that the wreck wasn't located where everyone thought it was. His strategy was not to seek out the Titanic wreckage itself, but to instead try and accurately calculate its debris field.
He waits patiently for his shot.
Denied any covert military involvement. Quote, "There was nothing classified," Spindle told the New York Times. Ballard would later attempt to suppress the wreck's precise coordinates, but they were leaked.
Two torpedoes have been fired. They roar through the water at great speed. Each carries a 195-kilogram warhead. Just 3 years earlier, the RMS Lusitania was torpedoed and sunk in very similar circumstances. Now the torpedoes bear down on Olympic. Impact is a certainty.
In the end, the expedition was a win-win for the U.S. Navy and for the man whose ambition was to locate the wreck of an old luxury ship.